Welcome in to Locked On Knicks, and it is a busy weekend, or it was a busy weekend in Knicks land. 2 Knicks games, 1 win, 1 loss. Oddly enough, the win was kind of discouraging, and the loss was kind of encouraging. So we're going to talk about it. I don't have Gavin with me. If you're on YouTube viewing us, you already know I've got a guest co-host today, but if not, let me just tell you guys, I have Matthew Miranda with me, who you might know as at mmiranda613 on Twitter. Also has a new pod coming out on the Believe Network, writes in a bunch of different places. I'll get into more of that in a second. But we're going to take our drop and then come back and discuss a busy weekend of Knicks games next on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks. Just wanted to thank you guys for making Locked On Knicks your first listen every day. We're here for you guys 5 days a week, giving you daily New York Knicks podcasts on all platforms, totally free, including YouTube, which I must plug again. If you're not already listening to us on YouTube, or I should say watching us on YouTube, be sure to check that out. Drop some subscribe and some likes if you wouldn't mind. That's super useful, even if you just plan on still listening to the audio product. But at any rate, I am Alex Wolf. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site, The Strickland, which you can find at thestrick.land. And I am joined by my Strickland recapper extraordinaire, among many other things. Matthew Miranda, you might know them as mmiranda613 on Twitter. Miranda has a new Knicks pod on the Believe Network with another frequent guest, although has been on a while, to Locked On Knicks. Got to change that. Stacey Patton, so new podcast coming out. Miranda's also a writer for Strickland and Posting and Toasting and co-host of the Jacobin Sports Show. And they tell me that I wear a lot of hats, Miranda. How are you doing?
I went bald very early, so I am used to wearing many hats all the time. I'm very, very comfortable with that.
Yeah, I am simply receding. Yeah, I've always been a hat guy. So, I guess I'm just getting prepared for that eventuality myself. But I got a haircut. So I think this is the first time I've been on the YouTube channel with just like my hair showing.
That's nice.
Yeah, I've been a very, very scruffy man for the last like 2 months because I just didn't get a haircut. So
speaking of scruffy,
the Knicks.
Let's segue to the New York Knicks.
Yeah. So, 2 games this weekend, and since it was a Saturday, Sunday, we're covering both of them in one episode. The Knicks beat the Rockets 106-99 on Saturday night, but I actually wanted to lead off with the loss, which occurred tonight. 109-103, the Knicks lose to the Bulls, which on the surface kind of sucks, but if you go just a little bit below the surface, you realize, okay, this is like a team in the Bulls that has legitimately looked good. Granted, the Knicks handed them one of their only losses so far this season, but that feels like a very different Knicks team compared to what we've been seeing lately. And this game just sort of served as sort of an affirmation to me that these Knicks seem to play up or down to their competition, depending on how good of a team they're facing. But like, I don't know. Let's just get into it, I guess. Like, what was your biggest takeaway from this Bulls game? I whether it's the starters somewhat playing better, Julius Randle really finding his mojo, which was great, or RJ Barrett still not able to make a shot. I mean, what was the big thing that kind of stood out to you?
Those are all worth exploring. I think the biggest thing that stood out to me in this game was it reminded me of when, a baseball team has been slumping for a while, and especially, your top starter is scuffling, and then you lose a game that they start like 2-1, but they go 8 innings and they give up 2 runs, and you're hopeful that that is of more significance than the actual game. The Bulls are a good team. They just came off winning in Denver, which is never easy for anyone. It's painful to acknowledge like how good they are, because I really was at the front of the offseason like, you're all overrating Chicago, these moves are not a big deal, like, and it really has worked for them. But I think the biggest takeaway I took was I was disappointed that they lost, but I'm of a slightly different. I was talking to Stacey, who you mentioned earlier last night after the Houston game, and Stacey is one of the people who really seem to have higher expectations of where this team would go this year. I didn't. The signs I'm looking for growth really don't involve the Knicks having a better record or getting out of the first round. I think it's a completely different standard for them this year, and so the fact that they lost in Chicago competitively on a night when nobody but Randall and Quickly made more than 3 shots, and when they were 7 of 27 from deep, but were in it at the end. And I think you saw at the end, like, really the difference between the two teams was Chicago had 2 closers, and the Knicks did not. And until it came down to those last couple of minutes, it was anyone's game. So I think the biggest signs were the encouragement from Randall and from the team in terms of, I think, looking more for shots that were like their identity a year ago. I think they've been way too live by the sword, die by the sword with the 3. And it was really encouraging seeing them, I think, playing what feels to me like a more sustainable approach. The threes are exciting, but it's like watching a boxing match in a Rocky movie where, like, it's just roundhouse after round, and, like, when it hits, it's awesome. When it doesn't hit, there's no other option. And thankfully, at least tonight, particularly with Randall, there was.
Yeah, speaking of identity too, this was one of the first games where I think the Knicks have really looked like they had a plan on offense recently, at least with the starters, you know.
Yes.
So often there's just like your turn, my turn. And they talk about that all the time. Like Han is always getting on that in the post-game show and stuff like that. And I think that they focus on that a little too much. Clyde hates that too, obviously, during the games, the stagnation, Mike, but like in this game, they definitely had a plan. It was, let's get Julius going for mid-range again. Let's get him in these situations where the Bulls are doubling him hard. Let's get him in situations where we can let him kick to an open shooter again like he used to. Let's generate switches for him on almost every possession and get him a matchup that he wants. And lo and behold, I mean, Caruso kind of ate his lunch a little bit early on, but as the game went on, they managed to kind of wear down Caruso and Lonzo Ball, who have been two like really great defenders this year. Like, they honestly make the Bulls defense. Yeah. And the Knicks were able to crawl back, or not, I shouldn't say crawl back, but take a little bit of a lead in the third quarter because Caruso and Ball were both in foul trouble, and they both had to sit with 4 fouls for a while. And it was really smart of the Knicks to attack those two and try to generate free throws that way, first off, and then try to generate foul trouble for the other team and take their 2 best defenders out of it. It's sort of similar to what the Bulls did in getting Noel in foul trouble, which I didn't think those fouls were particularly great. I thought that he got kind of screwed on like at least 2 of those foul calls, but I'm sure that Bulls fans feel kind of the same about some of the fouls that Caruso and Ball got called for. And it's strategy. Yeah. So I really liked what the Knicks did there. But also, and let me know what you think about this, because I think that you had noted that there was a little bit of more symbiosis between Kemba and Randall in your recap that you wrote for the Rockets game too. But like, yeah, I also felt like those two, particularly in the third quarter, had an actual plan together and kind of looked like they were finally figuring out how to play with one another.
Yeah, it was one of the only times this year where it hasn't felt like that your turn, my turn thing. And if you remember, Randall's first season in New York when Marcus Morris was there, they were their 2 best scorers, and it took months for them to have a good game together. It was always one or the other. And I think I was talking last night to Stacey about this. I don't think Randall's ever played with a player like Kemba. And Kemba's not what Kemba used to be. Like, we all know that. But I don't think, if you look at Randall's history, like, he was on the Lakers end of Kobe's career when they really stunk. He was on the Pelicans. Drew Holiday is not the same kind of volume, I think, of shooter that Kemba Walker is. He's a different player. Randall's first few years in New York, he's playing with Elfrid Payton. I don't think Kemba's ever played with someone like Randall either. Like, Randall is a true point forward. You mentioned Randall, like, going back down on the block and doing things. I also thought, and this started in the Atlanta playoff series, and it's persevered all the season. Ever since that playoff series, I feel during the series and this season, Randall has become to me like transparently, and it doesn't always add up if you look at his numbers, but to me, Randall looks to pass too much. He always looks to pass. There are sequences where you get the ball and like he's looking to pass. I was glad tonight to see. I don't think Randall is capable of being like selfish because I just think he's too instinctive of a passer. But it was nice on a night like this when the Bulls were missing Vukovic and they were missing Patrick Williams that Julius Randle, I thought, passed when he should have and stuck with the shots when he also should have. And one of the best sequences where he really seemed to have that in good balance was with Kemba. Unfortunately, it didn't last, too much longer. But again, that would be the real, core small sample that I'm taking out of this game and hoping to project over the rest of the season is that Kemba and Randall really haven't played that much together, in a larger perspective. It takes even great players a long time generally to learn to play together. It took LeBron and Wade a year. I'm not saying these guys are on that level, but I'm saying like that actually could further explain why it's a struggle. And I don't think their head coach specializes in, hey, let me make sure the offense is really rolling. So I think the players kind of have to figure that out. And I think maybe they're starting to. They'll certainly have a good chance the next week to show that against much better competition.
Yeah, and we're definitely gonna get into that in a couple minutes here. Also, I want to kind of continue talking about this Bulls game, but I think I found I didn't want to talk about the Rockets game that much, but you know what? I think I found a way to sort of meld this together. First, I do just have to remind everybody about a couple of our sponsors for today's episode. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. All right, NBA fanatics, have you heard of Prize Picks? Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. I love this, and I know you will too. Prize Picks has the best NBA daily fantasy sports prop game on the market. Prize Picks offers more NBA props than any other DFS prop operator and offers all the superstar players as well as bench players, only recording a handful of minutes each game. Prize Picks offers any prop you can think of, from yardage to touchdowns, even interceptions thrown. All of our users that deposit and use our promo code will receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. Just be sure to use the promo code NBA. You can pick 2 to 5 players and an over-under on their projections, and you can win up to 10 times on any entry, and it's just you versus the projected numbers. Prize Picks allows mixed sport entries. You can take the over on LeBron combined with the under on Mahomes in the same entry. Maybe take the under on games played for LeBron next. We'll talk about that in a minute too. Use the award-winning app on both the App Store and Google Play. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. Prize Picks is safe and offers fast withdrawals. Don't hesitate. Check out prizepicks.com and use promo code NBA, or go to your app store and download the app today. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. And today's show is also brought to you by DirecTV Stream. Does this sound familiar? You've got one device that lets you catch the game live, another that lets you stream your favorite shows. You're watching sports highlights on your phone, and you've got your neighbor's best friends log in for the good stuff. Well, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all that entertainment you love without the hassle, and a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called DirecTV Stream, and it brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, so you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes and no need to buy another device ever again. And the best part, there's no annual contract. The other best part, which I'll continue to promote on here as a new DirecTV Stream customer, is that unlike Xfinity, if you're in the New Jersey, Connecticut area where you can only get Comcast Xfinity, that still has MSG blacked out, DirecTV Stream does carry MSG, so you can watch Knicks games without having to go to the darkest parts of the internet to do so. So, biggest selling point ever on this podcast. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get rid of Xfinity and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package. All right, so we're back in talking about these two Knicks games. And, we'll talk about as far as the Rockets game, the Burks explosion in a minute. But I think the big thing between these games, and we were talking about, this game, the loss to the Bulls being maybe a little more encouraging than the win against the Rockets. I felt like the Knicks won against the Rockets in spite of themselves. Like they kind of just won because Alec Burks decided to score 17 points in the fourth quarter. and also become like a human steel magnet. Like I don't know, I don't know how he did what he was doing, but it was just bizarre how good he was on defense and everything. But like, oh no, I didn't come away from that Rockets game thinking like, oh wow, this is a step forward. Like I did say at the Pacers game at the beginning of the week, where I was like,
Right.
this was a good game. This is a good gritty game against a dangerous team.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whatever. The Rockets are not dangerous. They're a little kitty cat. Like, you don't have to worry about them. You should be able to just stop them into the ground and be done like a bug, you know. But the Knicks turned it into a whole thing. This game, you know, I just felt like there was so much more. I felt like all that was missing in this game, basically, and tell me if this sounds wrong, against the Bulls was just shots going in. You know, the process was there, and that was exactly what we said about the Pacers game too, and you know, some of the other games recently, which was like, okay, yeah, you know, even if they didn't win this game, the process was there. The shots just weren't falling, but they looked better. So, you know, I think this game against the Bulls, if this portends what's to come with them playing against these better teams over the next week and a half, I feel pretty good about it. But how did you feel about like the Houston game in relation to this game?
I certainly think that if you were to keep the outcomes and reverse the order of the game, you'd feel worse going into next week. If the Knicks had lost a tough game in Chicago, come home and won like that against Houston, I think people would be very down. I again, for me, it goes back to what my expectations are for the team, and I think there's a bit of there's a there's a scene. I just watched The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, so this is in my head. There's a scene in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe where this kid, I think Edmund, he gets Turkish delight and he like loves it, and he eats so much Turkish delight. I think that he gets like a little sick of it at some point. Like you don't want like too much of it. The Knicks, I think we have been. This has been the best really sustained run by this franchise in a long time. Everybody knows that. But I think what you can't lose sight of is the way that it actually took shape last season. The Knicks last year were right around 500 most of the season. It wasn't until they went on this crazy West Coast trip late in the year that looked like it was going to sink them. They had to play the Lakers. They had to play all these tough teams. And they went on this crazy winning streak. And they flew and they were, you know, they ended up 10 games over, and that's great. But this is a team that basically for the last 89 games has been, I think they're 50 and 39, which is good. Mm-hmm. If you throw in the playoffs, they're 51 and 43. Like I wasn't as distraught by the Houston performance as a lot of people, because I feel like, okay, the Knicks' job this year is to prove that last year wasn't a fluke. They don't have to win 50 games to do that. They don't have to get out of the first round to do it. They just need to maintain, I think, the culture and some of the characteristics that you saw in last year's team. And the other big thing last year was that they showed an ability to develop young players. Can they continue to do that? So for me, those are the metrics of improvement this season. So while the Rocket game was not fun to sit through, I will credit the Knicks that, like, I always thought they were going to win, and that's not something I could have said maybe even at this point, certainly last season, and definitely in prior years. Like, the Knicks are not a team that you could ever say they definitely should win this game. It's a game they could easily lose in the past. But I think also there were details in how they pulled out the win that, again, I thought mattered more than the actual outcome. A loss would have been devastating. But, for example, the fact that Obi Toppin, when the offense was cratering in the first half, and a better team certainly might have put the Knicks away, Toppin kept getting to the line, which has been really one of the bright spots of the season. Toppin's free throw rate has almost tripled from where it was last year per 36. I thought that was a big sign for them. I thought the fact that Thibodeau finished with Burks and Quickly and didn't revert to, well, I have to have Rose or I have to have Kemba. I'm not sure how that bodes for the future, because the thing that confuses me with Thibodeau is I don't know where his compulsions start and end. So do I believe that Tom Thibodeau in a playoff game would close with Quickly and Burks? I'm not sure. I don't know if he could let himself go that far, but it was encouraging to at least see he tried it. It was like, okay, he's this very conservative lover, and one night he tried to get he had some tequila. He tried something he's never tried before. He may never do it again, but I'm proud of him that he tried it. And I think, like you said, in that Houston game, you began to see glimpses of Randall working a really nice two-man screen game on the arc with Fournier, similar to what he had last year with Bullock. And remember that, Fournier and Randall, I think, are struggling in a way also, but Bullock was there 2 seasons. Continuity is a big thing. So what I took from the Houston game was not a happy end product, but I felt like what you were seeing emerge kind of under the surface was encouraging. And I think that's a through line with the Chicago game. Like, not happy with how it ended. Not happy that, again, they got off to a slow start. They were down 20-8. Not happy that they trailed most of the night and blew a fourth quarter lead and lost. But like you said, I think the things that you can point to in this game bode better for next week than if the Knicks had gotten like a miracle 3 at the buzzer and won, but not done some of the things that they did.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I wanted to quickly revisit that point you made about expectations versus reality and all that stuff too. I literally, like, before this game tonight, recorded a Locked On NBA segment, and the premise was like, what's wrong with the Knicks right now?
Yeah.
And it's funny to think that way because, as you said, and I mean, I've been sort of trying to reflect on this lately too. Like, I've literally been going back to the Knicks game log from last year and counting out, okay, through 15 games last year, they were whatever, through 17 games that I might go back after we record this, to be honest, and go look and see what their record was last year after 17. But by and large, they floated around, anywhere from, at their best, like 2 games above 500 to, at their worst, like 3 to 5 games below 500 last year, all the way up until that heater right at the end of the season. And that was all it took. I mean, sometimes that is all it takes to propel you. Some of the best teams in NBA history, they do it just by having a couple win streaks in the middle of the season, and that's just how they do it. Sometimes it's like 15-game win streaks, so it's nothing to sneeze at. But, sometimes those are the things that define a season. And there is sort of this weird disconnect between, like, and I mean, I even said this myself, and you don't want to believe this stuff at the time, but there's thoughts that definitely entered my head last year of like, yeah, they're the 4 seed, but this feels a little fluky.
Yes.
And you don't want to embrace that and be like, no, this team that I love that made the 4 seed was a total fluke. But when you sit here and reflect on it this year, you think to yourself, without that win streak, though, they were probably just a play-in team, and there would have been nothing wrong with that. We all would have been super happy with that. It's just expectations have gotten set higher because they went on that. They got hot at just the right time and just happened to take advantage of a weekend, Eastern Conference. I shouldn't say weekend. I mean, the Eastern Conference was pretty good last year, but like, obviously they won the championship. The 3 seed in the East won the championship, but like, this East power dynamic was weird last year, and it was all separated by like a handful of games from, like the 4 seed to the 7 seed, and the Knicks happened to come out on top. So, I think that there's going to be a learning curve this year too. And I don't think that I'm willing to do anything close to panic until like game 30, 40, something like that.
You've got to get to, I think, closer to the All-Star break, late January. I remember last year, Charlotte was ahead of the Knicks for a long time until they lost LaMelo, and then they tanked. Boston was ruined by COVID, like absolutely ruined by COVID all year. They disappointed. I don't know what happened with Miami. Maybe it was the transition from the short break from the finals and the bubble through the season. But like Miami, like there were a number of teams that no one who didn't want to be committed to an asylum would have picked the Knicks to be better than, and they were. And this year I think you're getting more of that, of a balanced, like appropriate East, like what the East actually is. But I think also when we talk about, how do you fairly evaluate this team? One of the things that there's certain signs that you look for that distinguish a team that has gone from a joke to legitimate, not a contender, but like legitimate. And one of them last year, especially, you saw a team becomes good at home. Like one of the first things you see is you'll see a team that's good at home. They're terrible on the road. Then they get like decent on the road. like there are certain patterns that occur. One thing that's been really interesting with the Knicks under Thibodeau, and it's persisted this year, the Knicks for a long time, going back to even Mike Woodson through Fizdale, the Knicks have every single year had at least one just killer losing streak. Sometimes they'll have a series of them. When you go 17-65, that happens. But the Knicks have had a lot of years where they're 16-13 or they're 22-22, and then they lose 8 of 9, and then Derek Fisher gets fired or whatever happens. The Knicks this year have not lost. Let me just double check on this. Yeah, the Knicks haven't lost 3 games in a row this year. I know they're not playing great, they're not playing like amazing, but one thing that was characteristic of the team fairly early. You remember last year they lost 5 in a row at the beginning. They were 5-8. They had just lost 5 in a row. There was a lot of concern. From that point on, I think when I checked a while ago, I think they had 2 losing streaks the rest of the year of 3, nothing longer than that. And they had like 7 winning streaks that were that long or longer. And this season, like I was writing, tonight in a post game about, they haven't won consecutive games for 3 weeks, and they haven't. But if this is not the Knicks, if this is a team that their fans and certainly outsiders had any reason to give any credit to, and I'm not saying the Knicks deserve it, but a different franchise would be credited for staying gritty. They've been banged up at the center position all year. I know other teams have had worse injury problems, but a different franchise that has more credit in the bank would be credited with, they're hanging around, they're keeping their head above water, they're persevering, and and when their players figure it out, and Mitch and Noel and Taj are, but it's the Knicks, and they haven't earned that. But I just think it's another sign of, am I pissed off that they're not 12-5 when they easily, I think, could be? Sure, but again, I think the smaller signs are what matter more, and I feel fine with where they are. I don't feel like they're underachieving. They're a 500 team, which, like you said at the beginning, are they playing to the level of their competition? Probably, because that's what they are.
Yeah, and they're quite frankly 2 career nights from 2 non-3-point shooters away from being 11-6 right now, which is another thing to consider. At any rate, I want to just let everybody know real quick, today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. And I love Thanksgiving, all the good food and treats, and plenty of them, but maybe you want a yummy dessert, but one that isn't so full of calories and sugar. It's the perfect time for Built Bars. Built Bar is the new holiday dessert. Feast on something delicious and feel good about it. One slice of pie has upwards of 300 calories, and that is on the low end. Most Built Bars are only 130 calories and only have 4 grams of sugar with plenty of protein. Replace the coconut cream pie with a coconut Built Bar, or go for a raspberry Built Bar instead of that raspberry pie. Lots of good flavors to replace any pie. They're even bringing turkey Built Bars. No, I'm kidding. They're not actually doing that. Low calorie, low carb, low fat, and high protein. All Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. They're a great option for when you're hungry. If Thanksgiving isn't coming soon enough, go for a Built Bar or 2. Share some at your family gatherings. It'll make things less awkward. Maybe Aunt Betty hasn't tried a Built Bar yet. New surprises are coming all month. Limited time flavors are arriving at built.com regularly, so check the site often. I just had a coconut brownie chunk Built Bar before I went to hot yoga earlier today, so gave me strength to get through that. That was tough. I hadn't done that in like 2 years. I wanted to die. There's nothing like a Built Bar Black Friday as well. Mark your calendar. Black Friday will be a huge event with all sorts of surprises. So go to built.com and use promo code LOCKED15 and you will get 15% off your order. Again, use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. All right. So to start wrapping the show up, Miranda, I wanted to talk about this upcoming stretch that the Knicks have coming. This Bulls game, obviously there was no recap between the Rockets game and the Bulls game. So, I didn't have like a Rockets recap to be like, well, next game starts the hell stretch. But,
Right.
Whatever. The hell stretch is officially underway. This Bulls game was the first game of a number of potentially really tough games that the Knicks are going to have to play here. So they have the Lakers at home. Then they have Phoenix at home. Then they go hit the road to go to Atlanta, and then have another home game at their away home arena at Brooklyn. And then they have 2 more home games versus Chicago and versus Denver. So really like a 3-game homestand at the end of this. At MSG East, and then back in the Garden for Chicago and Denver. But I think this Chicago game, as I was saying, was pretty. Actually, no. First off, let's get the elephant out of the room first. Do you think LeBron's going to be playing on Tuesday after this altercation with the Pistons? Like, do you think the league's going to let him off?
No. And first, I just want to say, as a Rochester resident, how proud I was seeing Rochester native Isaiah Stewart representing the Flower City and not taking no shit, even from the GOAT. I would think he has to be suspended. Has to be. Like, he was ejected, deservedly. He elbowed someone in the face.
Not only that, he punched him. He punched him in the face. He closed fist punched him backhanded.
Really?
Oh, yeah. If you look at the slow-mo replays, it looked like an elbow, but then you can see he looked back and watched his fist in onto Stewart's face.
Okay. That's a suspension.
Yeah. Like, I think it has to be.
It has to be.
I do wonder if, just based off this being like LeBron's league at still to at this point, if they're gonna let it go from his perspective, or maybe just try to frame it as, well, both parties were in the wrong, so we're not going to suspend anybody.
I'll tell you what, I think Stewart's reaction ensures, if Stewart didn't react at all, I'd be more afraid that they're going to let it slide. Yeah. There's going to be so much now publicity around it.
Yeah, it'd be pretty tough. Well, now that there has been those slow-mo breakdowns of him punching him in the face, I mean, I don't see how they could let that go.
No, but I'm not one to put anything beyond the reach of capitalist greed.
Yeah, exactly. National TV game in MSG against the Knicks, there's a world where I could see them even just pushing the deliberation, oh, well, we haven't made a decision yet. Let's let LeBron play.
So we'll wait until the appeals are. I'll say this, though, and this will be an interesting test of, in one sense, of where the NBA is now versus back in the day. In '93, the Knicks and the Bulls were fighting for the top record in the East, and they had a big game coming in Chicago. I think it was in Chicago. They were playing each other. The night before they played, Chicago was in Indiana, and it became kind of a famous little skirmish. Something happened between Reggie Miller and Michael Jordan, where Michael Jordan almost raked Reggie Miller's eyes out, and Reggie Miller freaked out and went back at Michael. There was a big scene, and at the time, you're thinking the Knicks and Bulls are playing a national game tomorrow for first place in the East. There's no way the NBA is going to suspend Michael Jordan. And they did. And the Knicks won the game, and whatever. It didn't help because Charles Smith. But it would be very interesting to me to see if the NBA can contort itself this time into a reason why, Knicks Lakers is a big game, but this isn't Knicks Bulls in 1993 for first place in the East. It's a big game. You still have star power. You still have. It's not LeBron, but it's not like the Lakers are the Lakers.
It's not like they're bereft of anybody else. Plus, they have Carmelo. Plus, they have.
Yeah, I think there's enough there.
Yeah,
but I don't trust Adam Silver at all. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. It'll be interesting. I mean, yeah, I think they got to suspend him, though. And honestly, I'll be extremely disappointed in the league office if they suspend Stewart, because one, he got punched in the face, was bleeding profusely. So he was literally seeing red. But the other thing is it seemed like LeBron said something to him to make him get even more incensed. And that they'll try to take statements or whatever from people that were there, but I guarantee nobody will blab what it was or whatever. But unless maybe if a Pistons player heard it, but I think, I wouldn't do anything to Stewart. I would definitely suspend LeBron, and
what's
not
funny
even just
there is LeBron just after their game against the Celtics. So he finally addressed Enes Kanter's shoes and criticism of him. And LeBron, who's the king of passive aggressiveness, gives some bullshit answer about, I don't waste energy. If I have something to say, I say it like a man. And we've seen you half your life as a public figure. You don't do that. We don't know you don't do that.
Yeah.
you didn't come at Kevin Love like a man. So I find it. I know LeBron said something. I know
Mhm.
LeBron was not thinking that like anybody would dare come at LeBron.
Especially
I
not a
think,
second year, not
yeah,
particularly notable
second
player, you
year,
know?
yeah. But I think Stewart's looking at a multi-game suspension. I think he's getting 3 games at least.
I think what they'll use to justify that is the second foray where he, like, played Derrick Henry and knocked over a bunch of
And the
people.
third foray, and maybe the fourth foray.
Yeah, and then the one where he tried to sprint down the tunnel to go find LeBron that way,
He
like
literally, glad you mentioned Derrick Henry. One of the camera angles, he really looks like a bowling ball, and he's
oh,
just
yeah.
like plowing dudes over.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, go figure. We wound up talking about this for a minute. So let's briefly before we sign off here, just give predictions. So again, I outlined 7 games here coming up before the Knicks get any sort of a break. Which, maybe this is actually kind of a good thing because they seem to play up to good teams and extremely down to bad teams. So
Mhm.
I guess maybe this will be a fun stretch. But so again, Lakers, Phoenix at home, then at Atlanta, at Brooklyn, Chicago, and Denver.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that's 6 games, not 7 games. Uh, what are you thinking that the record's going to be that they're going to come out of this with? If you were a betting man,
I think they're going to go at least 3-3.
I
Um,
I kind of feel that way too.
and
I
I'm fine. I'm fine with it. I
Yeah,
think I hate to make predictions, but I think with LeBron out, the Laker game becomes obviously much more winnable. Watch Carmelo will get like 30 in that one. Um,
yeah, it'll be a
I'm
vintage.
excited for this kind of all year. I'm really looking forward to the Atlanta game
Mhm.
as a big, not to make too much of one thing, but so many things turned for them. What kind of gets lost sometimes in the playoff outcome is how Randall just destroyed Atlanta all last year in the regular season, had enormous
Mhm.
performances against them. I'm very curious to see. Okay, it's been however many months. You've made roster changes. You've had a chance to process. Let's see how it goes. Like, let's see what does it look like now. Nobody last year could guard Trey Young either. Let's see what that looks like now.
Mhm.
If Mitch is there, especially, let's see how Capella handles an actual physical presence in the middle that he has to contend with. Let's see what Randall's learned. I think the whole stretch is interesting, but I'm especially, probably more than any other game, oddly, it's the Atlanta one that I care the most about how they look in that game. Like,
Mhm.
that's the one I want the most.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. I think the Lakers game is winnable. I think they'll steal one of the other 4, and then I think they could beat Atlanta as well. I do think that I mean, if you talk to anybody, like, basically Atlanta right now is having issues similar to what the Knicks are having,
Mhm,
but they're actually losing the games.
mhm,
They're
mhm.
they're not a game above 500. They're actually, like, in the win and loss column, they're bad right now.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, they
yeah.
need yeah, they don't just need to, like, turn things around in a way that starts getting them more wins. They need to start turning things around in a way that gets them wins, period. Like,
Yep.
they're just not doing good right now. So I do think I hope Mitch is healthy for that because I want to see if I was correct about thinking that Mitch would have made a huge difference against Capella. I want to see how the backcourt does guarding Trey or how they don't do guarding Trey, with Bullock gone, who was kind of like the guy tasked with dealing with Trey Young in the playoffs for better or worse, stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see how things go. And also just if Nate McMillan kind of plays things close to the vest
Mhm.
for now in the regular season, because he still is trying to hold some stuff back for the playoffs, like clearly they did last year
It
against the
would also
Knicks.
be nice just to have the experience of seeing Trey Young having to play defense against somebody on the Knicks at some
Yes,
point.
exactly. Like even Fournier with all of his struggles, you're not going to be able to hide Trey
Yep,
Young on Fournier
yep, yep.
any day of the week. That'll be the game that gets Fournier out of his slump. So
Yeah, hopefully.
at any rate, this has been great. Miranda, thanks for popping on. We are starting to run a little long, so I'm going to wrap things up here. But did you want to remind everybody where to find all your work again, and of course the new podcast coming up and all that great stuff?
Yeah, sure. I'm on Twitter at mmiranda613. You can find my writing at postingandtoasting.com and obviously the Strickland, Strict.land. The Believe Pod, we're recording our first episode tomorrow. I don't know yet what it's going to be called, but again, if you come to the Twitter page, it'll be up there. It'll be posted. So keep an eye out for that. Stacey Patton is really fun to talk Knicks with, and has a lot of perspectives that I don't. So I think it'll be an interesting conversation. Check it out after, of course, you are done listening to Alex Wolf on Locked On Knicks.
Yeah, thanks for making us your first listen every day, of course. Anyway, all right, sales pitch over, episode over. Thank you all so much for listening. If you're not already, go find us on YouTube, subscribe, like some videos, and do us a favor in that way, even if you plan on listening over your favorite podcast app. But no matter what, we're always here for you guys. Thanks for listening so much. And we will talk to you all soon. Peace out.